woman just sneezed. Strangely, 2 long worms crawled out of her nose. Her friend who was chatting with her quickly called 911. The rescue team promptly arrived. Despite their mental preparedness, the sight before them startled them. Astonishingly, there were 2 large roundworms. Paramedics quickly grabbed large forceps and slowly pulled the roundworms out. The woman couldn't understand why there were roundworms in her nose. Paramedics speculated that she must have consumed contaminated food. The woman immediately refuted, claiming that she only ate organic food delivered directly from the farm to the table. However, cleanliness and organic food are 2 different things because roundworms are transmitted through feces. Unwashed organic food can have a lot of feces on it. Upon hearing this, the woman couldn't bear it and started vomiting immediately. At that moment, it seemed like something was blocking her throat. Paramedics immediately inserted a manual suction device into her mouth. The next moment, over a dozen roundworms were suctioned out. Despite this, the woman's pulse still hadn't recovered. Seeing this, the team quickly performed CPR. After their efforts, the woman finally regained consciousness.
The man drilled a hole on top of the woman's head with a wine opener. The firefighter shouted for him to stop, but the man didn't stop. He said he was saving her. It turned out the woman's eyes were bloodshot and bulging, a sign of intracranial hypertension. Drilling the skull was to relieve the pressure, and blood spurted out instantly. Firefighter Clark was amazed that a wine opener could be used this way. The man's name was Weston. He was a military doctor. He came back home to visit while on leave, only for the train he was on to derail. There were countless casualties on the scene. Weston quickly stepped in to help the injured with his assistance. Dozens of injured people received proper aid, but no one expected that. The lively Weston from a moment ago would suddenly collapse without warning. Clark hurried to check, only to find a large bruise on his belly. It turned out his internal organs were severely damaged, causing internal bleeding. To save the injured, he deliberately ignored his own injuries. The firefighters rushed to carry Weston to the emergency area, hoping it wasn't too late to save him. But when the doctor saw the bruise, he immediately declared him dead.
Black. We need the space.
The black mark symbolized death. Clark said that Weston saved so many people. How could they just let such a hero die? The doctor didn't want to argue at this critical moment, so he relented. No one expected that. Later, he found an excuse to send the paramedic away and tore off Weston's red tag, revealing the black tag underneath that signified death. Not long after, Clark, still worried, came to check on Weston's condition, only to find him lying among the corpses. He confronted the doctor, but the doctor said,
"Even if I had an ambulance, he wouldn't make it to the hospital alive."
Weston was well aware of his own condition. He called Clark over and said he didn't regret what he did, because as a military doctor, saving the wounded first was his mission. With that, he closed his eyes. The man had just stopped to rest, but saw an explosion suddenly occur on the hillside ahead. Immediately after, a train carriage rushed forward. It was a freight train. The firefighters quickly rescued the train driver, only to learn that the cargo being transported was insecticide, chlorine, and toxic waste. The most dangerous of all was a tank containing 28,000 gallons of propane. The propane tank had already partially ignited. As the temperature gradually rose, it could trigger a massive explosion at any moment. While the firefighters were discussing their strategy, they suddenly heard the sound of a horn. They followed the sound and found a car crushed under the carriage. Firefighter Mateo crawled through the gap, finding the driver was conscious, but with his chest pinned by a metal plate and his legs trapped under the steering wheel. Mateo cut through the hydraulic column of the steering wheel and lifted the metal plate with all their strength, unaware that this action pushed the driver into a life-threatening state. Meanwhile, on the propane tank side, water hoses were insufficient to cool it down. As the temperature inside the tank rose, the pressure release valve suddenly shot out a burst of flame. The propane had reached the explosion threshold. Fortunately, the supporting firefighters arrived in time and added for more water hoses. As more cold water covered the tank, they finally managed to control the temperature. The hissing deathly sound gradually faded, and the explosion crisis was averted. However, the car driver under the carriage suddenly fell unconscious. Mateo listened to the heartbeat, which sounded like a muffled noise underwater. The paramedic Tommy outside told him it was pericardial effusion. The fluid had likely flowed into the pericardium after the pressure of the metal plate was removed. She immediately guided Mateo to perform emergency aid, taking the longest needle, locating between the 4th and 5th ribs, and inserting the needle on the left side of the sternum. The needle safely pierced the pericardium, and as the fluid was drawn out, the driver slowly regained consciousness. At this point, the rescue operation was finally completed successfully.
This woman, believing that cell tower could spread viruses, attacked maintenance worker at a cell tower with a crossbow, nearly causing the death of the maintenance worker. Just moments ago, the rescue team received a call about a worker trapped at the top of the cell tower. They speculated that the man might be suffering from a heart attack or seizure. Now they must quickly rescue the man. They climbed up the ladder and soon reached the top of the cell tower. By this time, the man had fallen into shock with severe injuries to his thigh, bleeding profusely. Suspecting expected to be stabbed by some tool. The captain quickly secured the man with a rope and the paramedic examined the wound on his thigh, discovering it was an exit wound. The captain found it strange.
That doesn't look like any gunshot I've ever seen.
But suddenly something was shot towards the captain from a distance. Upon seeing this, the captain quickly instructed the teammate to take cover and removed an arrow from his back. Surprisingly, another arrow shot towards them before they could react. The captain immediately realized they were under attack, swiftly contacting the team below. However, 2 more arrows were shot at them. The team quickly followed the direction of the arrows and found a suspicious room with open window and air conditioning on. Suspecting the attacker was there, a woman suddenly emerged and shot an arrow towards them. Luckily, it hit the antenna. Firefighters decided to teach her a lesson. Meanwhile, the worker's thigh was still bleeding and it seemed critical. The paramedic, risking danger, used a hemostatic clamp to stop the bleeding. However, the woman from a distance aimed at them again. Fortunately, the sound below attracted her attention. Firefighters knocked her down with a water hose, and the other teammates outside broke in, subduing the woman trying to escape. However, the investigation afterward left the firefighters jaw-dropping.
According to her, she was trying to stop the spread of COVID-19. She read on the internet that it was being spread by 5G towers.
Oh, good. I thought for a second she might be crazy.
The sky suddenly started raining frogs. A man was terrified by the scene. He immediately dialed 911. As he spoke, a frog descended from the sky, perfectly landing in the man's mouth, getting stuck in his throat. Rescue team rushed to the scene. The sky at this moment was very eerie, turning into a shade of green. Indeed, frogs were falling from the sky, and the ground became a frog's domain. The firefighters were shocked by the scene. They only knew there was a storm today, but where did the frogs come from? One firefighter speculated it might be a tornado, sweeping frogs up from a pond and bringing them here. The entire amusement park was in chaos. They couldn't worry about that now. They had to first find and rescue the man with the frog stuck in his throat. At this moment, the man's daughter called up to them, saying her dad was choking. The paramedics hurriedly approached to examine him, shining a flashlight. Indeed, there was a frog, perfectly lodged in his throat. She attempted to use pliers to extract the frog, but the frog was too slippery and couldn't be gripped. To make matters worse, the frog slid further down. Unable to use the pliers, the firefighter had to resort to the Heimlich maneuver. Finally, they managed to dislodge that frog. On the street, a giraffe strolled leisurely by, followed by an elephant, startling the firefighters, who stepped back in fear. Just moments ago, the fire station took a call that the zoo was under a hacker attack. All the gates were opened, various animals were wandering around, but the victim who made the distress call couldn't be found. Suddenly, a faint cry for help was heard, and the firefighters discovered a man in the corner. The man said he had his leg bitten by an animal. Faced with the firefighters' inquiries, the man had no idea what had bitten him, only that it screeched and could spit some kind of poison at him. However, what was even more frightening was that his boss was still trapped in the store, and the terrifying creature was inside too. Upon hearing the news, the captain didn't dare to delay, instructed a few to take care of the injured and do animal control.
What am I supposed to do?
The animal makes a move, control it.
Then led paramedic Hen into the store. They quickly found the man lying on the floor, staring at the man's mutilated ear. The firefighters were also curious at this moment. What had bitten him? Just then,
That
Is an alpaca.
standing in front of them was an adult alpaca. The captain was puzzled. Aren't alpacas supposed to be gentle animals? Hen explained that once alpacas are provoked, they can exhibit symptoms of violent aggression. To divert the alpaca's attention, Hen took out a bag of potato chips and lured the alpaca to the side bit by bit. Meanwhile, the captain took the opportunity to approach the man and slowly pull him out. But just as the two were about to reach the door, Hen's alarm accidentally fell to the ground. The sudden noise completely infuriated the alpaca. Although it didn't immediately attack the two, it stood in place, continuously making noise.
why is he not attacking?
It's calling its friend.
Suddenly, the alpaca came rushing out, then screamed and charged towards them. Fortunately, the two turned around and escaped through the main gate, while outside the other teammates found the situation amusing.
Ran from an alpaca.
2 alpacas and there was no running.